Hey there, welcome to this episode of Author Success Show. The special guest we have today is Isabelle Knight. Isabelle helps founders, entrepreneurs, and business owners to build brands, to create your unique and compelling brand story, navigate and define who you want to reach and how through PR, publicity, and marketing. She uses her knowledge, expertise, and contacts from almost 20 years of being a publicist for the TV, film, entertainment, and luxury and lifestyle brand sectors to focus on you and your business to help solo entrepreneurs and founders find their voice and make it heard. She has special focus on helping female founders and entrepreneurs to raise their profile and has created exclusive products for women in business to support this aim. In our conversation with Isabelle today, let's find out how authors can use PR to market their books for free. Hey Isabelle, welcome to Author Success Show.
Hi Jyotsna, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
My pleasure, Isabelle. I keep getting a lot of questions from authors regarding public relations. How do they deal with PR? And I thought instead of me trying to find the right answers, why not have you on our show and ask all those questions to you?
Brilliant. I love answering those questions. So we can get stuck in. Yeah.
Great. So how did you get started with PR? I know you have more than 20 years of experience in this industry, but how did it all begin?
So yeah, as you say, I've been doing PR for a while now, without aging myself too much. So so about 20 years in the business. So I started my publicity career. So I talk about publicity rather than PR. There's PR and publicists are slightly different. So a publicist is proactively working on behalf of a brand or a product or a business to promote them. PR typically involves managing the reputation. So there's a bit of a nuance in terms of the difference there. But a publicist is someone who's kind of proactively protecting and enhancing a brand. So I started working in film and TV almost 20 years ago. Well, actually, first of all, I did music for a while and then jumped into film and TV. And I used to work for great big movie distributors like Disney and Fox and Universal. And so I worked on big movies and with big movie stars. And then I kind of segued slightly into TV, so promoting TV shows. So shows that mainly produced in the UK but have then gone worldwide. And one of my biggest clients that I worked with was J.K. Rowling on the series called Strike, which is based on her novels, the detective novels that she wrote in recent years. So after obviously the big Harry Potter phenomenon, she kind of changed tack and wrote a series of detective novels under a man's name, under a pseudonym, Robert Galbraith, and those were turned into TV shows, and I was promoting those TV shows. And over the years, I've worked with authors, some really unknown authors, first-time authors. Promoting a book, a movie, a TV show, they need a lot of the same skills, a lot of the same skill set and knowledge and contacts. And that's really what is, PR is all about. Having the story, so knowing what it is you want to say, knowing what it is you want to sell, who you want to sell it to, who you want to say it to, and making sure that message lands with the right audience in the right places. So a lot of this is now what I work to teach, particularly self-published authors. So those authors who are not with a big publisher, they don't have a big PR team or a marketing team or a huge budget or any of those things that you might get with a large publisher like Penguin we have in the UK. You'll be able to tell me some others that you worked with, but self-published authors just don't have access to those resources. So I realized this year that where I'd been helping a lot of business owners and brand owners with the kind of PR and publicity of their brands, actually I started working with a couple of authors and realized that they are really missing that piece of that kind of marketing and PR publicity piece, not understanding what needs to go into that, and not understanding really fundamentally how important that is with your book. And if you haven't started to figure that out before you publish your book, then you're going to be potentially playing catch up for a really long time, and doing things the hard way, and really struggling with that piece. So that's where I started developing my program that I now run for authors, specifically self-published authors who don't have access to that knowledge, to those resources, to help them to understand. Because I always say to everybody, you absolutely can do this for yourself. You don't need to hire an expensive PR team or publicists to come in and do this for you. You can understand how to work this for yourself. And there's lots of reasons for that, but I often say to people, you are in fact often your own best publicist, because you are the person most passionate about what it is you do, what it is you're writing about, your own book. Your passion that has to come across to your audience or your readers. So that's how I began kind of doing essentially what I'm doing now, which is helping authors with that.
That's amazing, Isabelle. What I noticed is when I was doing my research on all the PR companies that do this kind of work, most of them are very general about their approach. But your approach is very specific to authors, and you are helping them to be their own publicists, right? And usually authors never think about PR, because the general notion is that publicity is meant for these big multinational companies. They have a PR team to do their job. But for individual authors, especially first-time authors, who are not yet at the level of J.K. Rowling, may not think that they can do this themselves. They may think that it's too expensive. So when should an author first think about doing the PR? Is it after they finish writing their book or before that?
So I would like to, I always like to say to people that thinking about this stuff, it's never too early to think about this. So as you have your idea for your book, you're thinking about what you want to write about, I would always encourage you to also think about who is going to read your book. Because I think a lot of people embark on writing with, a great passion for the subject and the topic. But I would like people to be more mindful of, well, when I've written this and I've put all of my, blood, sweat and tears into something that I'm really, really passionate about writing, what is the outcome? What's going to be the result? Who do I want to read my book? Because that's where PR begins and publicity begins. And, you want your book to find a reader. Most authors, once they've written a book, actually want people to read it. They don't want it to just sit around on their shelves gathering dust. They want people, they might not set out with big ambitions to become super famous or well known, but ultimately I think the vast majority of authors want people to read their books. So thinking about who is going to be reading your book, who is your reader, who are you writing the book for? And it's never too soon to start thinking about that, I think, rather than getting to the point of publishing the book and then going, oh right, so I don't know who's going to actually read this, and I need to talk about this book to somebody, but who am I going to talk to about it?
I totally agree with this, because in fact, when we get on the first book strategy call with our client, or if our client works with our coach, the very first thing we ask them to decide is who the book is for, even before they start writing the book. And I realized that it doesn't just help you in the writing, but also helps you later with the marketing when you're super clear about who the book is for, right? And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, there has been a traditional way of approaching PR, but you've been in this industry for a long time, and I'm sure your approach has also evolved. So what is your current approach, and how is it different from a traditional PR approach?
So my approach, it is different. So if you work with a PR person to do your PR for you, they're going to typically take your book, they take the product, they'll talk to you a bit about it, and then they'll go away and write something about it that they think is going to best communicate your book and the message of your book to the audience that they are going to help decide for you who that audience, who that reader is going to be. So the way I'm working with people is, I'm helping you to figure that stuff out for yourself, because it's much more powerful when you have been involved in that process of deciding, who is my book for? What are the key messages of my book? How do I want my reader to feel when they've read my book? What do I want them to go away with? What's the impact I want my book to have? What is the mission of my book? And being involved in that process and deciding for yourself what that's going to be, because that's going to help you. It's going to give you more longevity in terms of knowing how to publicize your book, not just for the 6-week window or the 3-month window that you might be working with a PR team for, but following that long, in the longer term, because ultimately, once you become an author, and you might write several books, you are still going to be publicizing those books all the time. Those books will be finding new readers all the time. So for you to really know what it is you want to say about your book, and what your book is saying to people, who those readers are, for you to understand that process. And then, so when I work with people, I help them to figure out, where is their reader hanging out? How are they going to reach those readers? So that's where the media comes in. That's where the publicity comes in, working out, well, what magazines are they reading? What newspapers are they reading? What radio stations are they listening to? What podcasts are they listening to? And figuring out, where are my potential readers hanging out? So where do I need to get my book visible and seen? But if you don't understand any of those processes, and you don't know, as the author of the book, it's your property, this is your creation. So I always think it's so important for you to understand how this is going to communicate itself to actual readers and buyers in the real world. Whereas, traditionally a PR team would take that away and they would do all that stuff for you. And some people say to me, oh, but that's what I want, because I haven't got the time to do all that. But even if I'm, doing it for them, I still want them to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and what the process is, because I think that's the most important thing, and that's the most important thing that I can help people with.
Right. So what I understand is, traditionally it's the media people who would make the decision about what to write about a book and where to place it and stuff like that. But right now you feel that the author should become the decision maker and decide where they want their books to be publicized, right?
Yes, ideally, I want the author to at least be involved in that decision-making process and understanding why and where and how. Yeah,
right.
Because ultimately, it's your book. You're the person who's going to be telling people about it for years to come, as it as it finds new readers. So you want to be able to understand how to do that, what you want to say and how you want to say it. And often for an author, that can be very, very difficult, because if you've never thought about marketing in those terms, never thought about PR in those terms, it doesn't come naturally. And that can be a very difficult part of it.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned about different avenues like podcasts and radio and newspaper and things like that. So most of our clients are the ones who work with Happy Self-Publishing are either writing business books based on their expertise, or a self-help book based on their life experience. So most of them are in the nonfiction genre. So for these categories, from your experience, which avenues would be like the best bet?
Well, that's a little bit like asking how long is a piece of string, because every book is going to be different. And yes, you might be writing in a very specific genre, like self-help, like business books, but ultimately it's all about who is that book for. So one business book might be aimed at very new business owners, entrepreneurs who are just starting out. What another book might be aimed at people who've been in business for a long time, or are looking to grow their business. Or one might be aimed at men, one might be aimed at women. So that's where we have to get more specific, and that's where really working with somebody who has expertise that comes into its own then.
Yeah. I know it's going to be totally different for every single book.
Yes, it's going to be different, and that's so with the course that I run. I'll get a group of authors, and each of them will have a very different book. Some of them will be fiction, some of them will be non-fiction, and so it's helping them to to figure this stuff out for themselves, but guiding them along the way, and and showing them, I mean, obviously I can do it very quickly. If you gave me one specific book, I would pretty quickly be able to say to you, right, these are the key things you want to be able to say, and this is the audience, and this is where you're going to go and find them, and that's fine for me to be able to do that for someone. But if they haven't understood why and where, and well, how did you work out that that's my reader, and how did you work out that that's where they are, I could do that for them, but then they wouldn't be able to do it for themselves.
Yeah, got it. So when it comes to the publicity part, I have come across two things, and tell me, which of the two things do you help with, or are both the things something that gets covered in your course? One is where the author goes and submits an article to publications like Forbes and Inc. Or any of the industry magazines or online magazines, or they go and become a guest on a podcast. So it's basically them directly communicating. Versus, I also see contributors of magazines writing about an author, where the author themselves is not contributing the article, but they are getting quoted or mentioned in other articles, or they're getting interviewed by reporters. So which out of the two do you help authors achieve?
Well, the answer to that is both, because they are just two different kinds of publicity. So whether it's somebody who is directly being interviewed or directly contributing, say, an article or a talk, or whether it's somebody, like you say, being quoted as part of a bigger article, all of these are just, slightly different types of publicity, but a publicist works on all of those things. So I would help people, either get on TV to be interviewed, or be interviewed on the radio, or be quoted in an article, or be a contributor, write an article themselves to contribute to a magazine. All of these are things that myself and everyone working as a professional publicist would work on all of those different types. They're all different types of publicity and PR. They're not different. They're not kind of different disciplines. They're all just variations. Yeah.
Sure. So what if an author says, hey, I'm super busy, I'm running a huge company, I have a team to take care, I have a family to take care, so I cannot possibly do all of this myself, though you're going to teach me all the good things. So would you also be able to completely do it for the author if they're not able to do it themselves?
I mean, yes. I don't. I mean, I personally don't offer that as a service right now. But yes, I mean, that's what I've spent my career doing. Basically, is taking people's products, whether that's books or TV shows or movies, or brands, with various different lifestyle products and so on. So I've worked on a great array of different kinds of brands and businesses. So yeah, that is what I've spent my career doing, is taking something and then creating a whole PR campaign around it.
Right. But I do agree that it's a nice and a very important skill to learn, especially because an author doesn't usually stop with the book. The book may be the first thing that they want to market, but after a year, they want to market their course, or they want to talk about their business. So it's definitely a nice business skill to master. And I'm so glad that you are not just doing it for them, which you used to do in the past, but now you're also teaching this to authors, right? So
yeah, that's right. And as you say, many authors, and I've worked with several authors who have businesses as well, and they want to market their business, and they're marketing their book is a part of their business. So yeah, the skills that I teach business owners and that I teach authors, we apply them in slightly different ways, but the fundamentals are the same. Getting your I call it the brand story, and that's a whole talk in itself. But getting the brand story right, getting the messaging right, getting the audience, whether that's a reader or a customer or a client, getting that bit right, and then figuring out, how am I going to reach those people? Where are they hanging out? I.e., what media are they consuming? So these are the basic fundamental steps that you have to figure out. And whether it's a business you're promoting or whether it's a book, it's essentially the same. the same formula, but we just, we have obviously certain things apply to authors and books, depending on what we're dealing with. But yeah.
Isabelle, could you just tell a few things that an author should keep in mind while writing their PR pitch?
So some really key things are being able to tell us what is your book about. And that's not just giving us a kind of plot synopsis or a summary of everything that's written in the book, but fundamentally, why have you written the book? What is it telling us? What is it for? Then who is it? Then working out who is it for? Who do you want to read it? Very clearly being able to tell us the messaging behind it. And all of this can be done whilst you are writing. You can be thinking about this. Then once you've finished it and you're getting it ready for publication, really start digging into, okay, planning out who is the reader going to be and how am I going to reach them? And at that point, really getting some professional help if you're feeling quite stuck with all of that. But getting started on it earlier than you think you should, not waiting until the moment your book is published to then worry about how do I market it, how do I publicize it.
Right. So typically the question that I get asked by a lot of authors for any kind of investment is, what's going to be my ROI if I spend on Amazon ads? What's going to be my ROI if I spend on a good book cover design? So do you also get similar questions from authors whom you ask when you ask them to invest in publicity?
Well, I mean, I do get that, but with publicity, it's a very obvious, it's a very, very low investment next to how much you're going to get out of it. If it's going to help you get clear on how to market your book, how to position your book, who to position it to, where in the marketplace you're going to position it, to actually help you start making those sales and start building your author brand and becoming, thinking of yourself first as a credible author and becoming and be seen as that credible author, then, the amount you would invest, for example, on a course becomes a tiny investment when you put it against all of those things that you're going to get out of it. So, it's not the same as taking out Amazon ads. Where you're going to be able to see clearly, oh well, if I spend this much on ads, then I'll make this much in revenue, and that's my ROI. But what you're getting with publicity and learning about how to position your book, how to market it, and how to build yourself a credible author brand. I think ultimately the ROI is how much value you're really getting out of that's going to see you through for years to come, and in terms of building a brand for yourself. So yeah.
Sure. So what you're saying is, if an author is not outsourcing this entire thing to a PR agency and they choose to do it themselves, then the only investment is the time and money in learning how to do this. But once they learn it, it doesn't really take much money to reach out to the right media outlets and pitching themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, once you've learned that and you've got the kind of the key skills and resources, so when I work with clients, I make sure they have those things and they have that core understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then after that, if they're implementing what they've learned, then it shouldn't actually cost them anything. After that, you shouldn't really need to spend much money at all. So, that in terms of PR and publicity, it's always the least expensive way of marketing anything.
Right. And also the least salesy way, I would say, because anything else that you do makes it look like you are trying to hard sell something, whether it's an ad or whatever. But when people are writing about you or speaking about you in media, it sounds very organic, right?
Absolutely. And because it's all about telling stories. PR fundamentally is about telling stories. It's not about getting on a stage or having an ad or having a TV slot where you're telling people how great your product is. It's PR gives you that credibility and authority because it's getting a third party endorsement, which you haven't paid for. Yeah. So it's somebody else endorsing your product or you or the brand business, giving it that credibility.
Yeah, and also I've seen the uh, shelf life of this investment, because if I'm running a Facebook ad, then today people will see the ad and they'll forget it, it's gone. But if I get written about in Huffington Post or something, then I can not just talk about the article, but I can use those logos on my website forever.
That's right. That's right. And then you always have that endorsement. Yeah. And you always have that against your name, and you'll
Right.
always be able to refer people back to it. So yeah, the value of it, and of sharing it, resharing it, bringing people's attention back to it, the value just keeps on going.
Absolutely. So, a final question. A lot of authors invest their time during the launch of their book, say about a month or two in marketing it. After that, it's not just the reader, but even the author forgets about the book and they tend to move on. And I feel that's a huge mistake, because an author typically spends months or even years in putting the book together, and then they do not use it to the fullest potential to bring back revenue and also reach out to a huger audience. So what would be the ideal number of months that an author should be marketing their book?
I mean, I would say typically you should expect to be marketing your book, as in talking about it, actively talking about it, actively looking for new audiences for it. I would say especially if you're doing it organically and doing it yourself and driving it yourself, I would say typically look to do that for 12 months, for approximately a year. Book marketing is necessarily a bit slower because people have to actually read the book. They need the time to read the book and digest it, and then talk about it. So, it's a slightly slower process than, for example, a movie, which, is kind of quick. So, books build audiences takes a bit more time, and you have to, so I would always say to authors, self-published authors doing this for yourself, pace yourself through and give yourself something to do, weekly, monthly, be doing something, whether that's pitching it to a new newspaper, pitching for an article that you haven't done before, or pitching yourself for an interview, or putting yourself forward for a podcast, or whatever it is. But I typically do that over the course of about 6 to 12 months, I would say.
Absolutely. So I think people should understand that this is like a long-term game, and they cannot be impatient about getting the results.
Yeah, it's very different. People say, "Oh, this is my launch day for my book." They'll do an online launch, and that's great. That's really good as a way of a kind of leaping off platform. But that's not the be all and end all. That's not the beginning and the end. Yeah. Once you've done that launch, whether it's online, offline, whether you're doing a launch party, whatever you've decided to do to launch the book initially, you then have to keep going, and you have to keep working at that, because that one launch is not going to carry you through enough sales and bringing enough new readers to your book. Like you say, if you've spent months, sometimes years writing a book, you have to put some decent time and effort into actually marketing it as well.
So true. Isabelle, where can our listeners and viewers go ahead to find out more about you, to see how they can work with you?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram. So I'm at Isabelle Knight PR. My website is buildyourbrandwithpr.co.uk. And you'll find me on LinkedIn as well. And I'm on Clubhouse if anyone hangs out on there as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear from any listeners who might have any questions. And I'm obviously based in London in the UK, and I'm running my course again in the new year. So if anyone listening is interested to hear more about that, drop me a line.
Absolutely. We are going to have all the links right below the show notes. Guys, just go and check out Isabelle's work. She's amazing, and you need to develop this skill on your own, so that you're not dependent on a PR agency every single time. Thank you so much, Isabelle, for being on Author Success Show.
Thank you, Jyotsna. It's a pleasure. Thanks very much.